Stephen Mackey, welcome to the Mindset Advantage podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Hey, thanks, man. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Been a big fan of yours for a little while here. I got into your book, The Locker Room, and watched all your stuff on YouTube. You're a heck of a motivational speaker, man. I just watching on YouTube sometimes makes me want to get up and run through a wall. When did you discover motivational speaking and knowing that you had a gift that not a lot of people have?
I gave my first speech in 8th grade, and I was so nervous to do it that my mom had to literally write the speech almost word for word for me and push me onto the stage. And I was so just terrified of being on stage, of saying, am I going to say the right thing? All of that. And once I got up there, it was like a light switch flipped. And I knew in that moment that whatever I did in life, I was going to do something that involved the stage. And so through high school, I looked for organizations that I could be involved in that would give me the chance to speak. But and then through college, organization volunteer with, and then ultimately got into a career field in ministry that allowed me to speak often. But it was really 2012 that I began the journey of becoming a professional speaker. You know, there's a difference between being able to speak in front of a group of people that you know, or that someone you know knows, and you're their guy. That has a way of, you could take a 6 and they'll make you a 9 because you're their guy. But once you start speaking in a place where you're a stranger to everyone in the room, they'll take a 9 and make them a 6. And so there's a different set of skills required to connect with a room that you have no prior connection with in an instant and draw them forward through that. And so I got involved with an organization that allowed me to do, of all things, school assemblies. And that was really where I learned to be a professional speaker. And it was kind of over that 5 years, from 2012 to 2017, when I started Two Words Character Development, that I started honing the skill. So if you think about, 8th grade, 1997 to 2012, it was, I have a passion for this. I think there's a skill set there. It's just the seed taking root underground. 2012 to 2017, I start to go, no, I want to be serious about this. And I say it's 2017 that I found my voice. And it was then that I go, okay, this is all of the influences that I have in my life as a speaker. This is my unique personality, my unique story in the lane I'm living in. You mix all that together, and that's my voice. And so it was 1997 to 2017, being intentional over those 30 years or whatever it was that it took to find my voice. And then I started my company, and then it's been working and fine-tuning that voice ever since.
My dad is a motivational speaker of 33 years. All of his friends are motivational speakers. So I've kind of grew up in the auditorium, I like to say. I've also started my speaking career in the last year here. So selfishly, I just got to ask, from a guy like yourself that is speaking all the time to a younger guy like me just getting into the game, I just got to scratch my own itch and ask, what advice would you have to younger speakers who are just getting in, maybe not young by age, but just young by experience? What's the advice you'd give to either me or some others out there who want to get into public speaking?
Yeah, the two things I would tell you are, number one, know your people. Know who it is that you're speaking to. If you're a speaker for everybody, you're a speaker for nobody. Because when you come out and you say, I can speak on business, and I can speak on faith, and I can speak to schools, and I can speak to this and this and this, then you never become an expert at any one of those things. You see the John Gordons of the world, your dad of the world, who can do all of those places, but they didn't start speaking everywhere. They spoke at one place and they became an expert in that one field, that one lane for that one group of people. And then all these other disciplines and areas saw how great you are in that one area, and they start making the connections. I speak to high school and middle school athletes and coaches. That's what I do. And I've gone 10 miles deep in that. And as a result, medical companies call and say, hey, our leadership team needs the same thing that you're talking about with these sports teams. or real estate companies or insurance companies or fitness companies. They call and say, we want, because they saw you go deep and become excellent at one thing. So the first thing I would tell you is know your people. You're a speaker for everybody, you're a speaker for nobody. The second thing I would say is the most important thing, more than your message, is your voice and your ethos. It's what you believe behind the message, and can you authentically say it? And the way that I think we find our voice, I alluded to it a moment ago, is the practice I suggest is find 5 speakers that you look up to, that you like. And it doesn't matter why you like them. You may like them because they dress great and they're CrossFitters, and you're like, man, I want to look like that on stage. Or it may be because they're a phenomenal teacher. It may be because they're poetic and they just, the way that they flow, whatever it is that you like about that speaker, identify it and then imitate it for a week, 2 weeks, and see what feels natural and see what feels forced. And I'm serious. Try to be just like them. If they talk with a lisp, you talk with a lisp. If they wear all black, you wear all black. And you try to become them, and then see what feels natural and what feels forced. Keep what feels natural, let go of what feels forced, and then do it again with another speaker, again and again and again. And what you're going to find is that now you are starting to put together a style that maybe has a little bit of John Gordon, maybe a little bit of Rick Warren, maybe a little bit of Tony, a little bit of E.T., a little bit of Inky. There's flavors, hints, notes of it all. But then you throw it in the blender with your story, your personality, your uniqueness, and you have a voice that is influenced by, has these hints of, but is uniquely you. And that's going to allow you to be authentic, right? That's going to allow you to step on stage and feel comfortable in your own skin and not go, I'm just a cheaper version of someone else. That's going to lead to confidence, and that's going to be communicated. There's so much unspoken that's communicated from a stage. And that's a great way to communicate non-verbally that you are the real deal.
Extremely well said. So know your people and then know your voice and your ethos. I want to take it just one step further because we both share the same love for coaching middle school, high school, and coaches. I'm in that same arena. So is my dad. So for the people out there that are also in that arena, I would love to hear from you, being the guy that's at the top. What advice do you have if those are your people? I mean, what have you learned from working with young athletes? What's worked really well for you, coach?
So the thing that I think is if I have a secret sauce, this is it. I'm a phenomenal listener. I listen to students and I listen to coaches, and I don't just listen to what they say. I listen to what they're not saying.
Mm.
And I'm convinced that student athletes will absolutely tell us everything that they need help with if we as adults will shut up long enough to listen to them. But unfortunately, what happens often is that we are so busy trying to get them to become clones, get them to do exactly as I say and not question it, that we can't hear the questions they're asking us. We can't hear where they don't understand. We see them acting out and we go, they just don't get it. They're not willing to fall in line. They're not willing. They don't have what it takes. When the reality is like, no, they are just doing the best that they can and they're acting out because they've not been taught how to act right. And you say, well, I talked about it and I showed it to them and I gave them a PowerPoint presentation. Great. That doesn't mean that you taught them how to do it. You can model the leadership, the character, the actions you want them to take. But until you move along the line and you go from modeling to teaching, teaching to testing, and testing to rewarding, students won't get it. And so one of the things that we do at Two Words Character Development is every quarter we interview about 24 students from across the state. And we just send out a list of questions and we let them be the experts on them. And we let them tell us what it is that they're struggling with the most. And sometimes they're explicit about it. Mental health, holding teammates accountable, stress, worry, anxiety. There are things that they're explicit about. And then other times there are things that you have to read between the lines. You have to listen to what's being said beyond what's being said to hear what it is that students need the most help with. But if we will listen, I'm convinced students will tell us exactly what they need. And the amazing thing is that when I listen to students to hear what they need, then it is almost, it's uncanny the ways in which when I listen to coaches, their needs are parallel.
Mm.
That the things that students need are the same things that coaches need. And so what I would say to someone that really in any industry, but certainly if you're working in athletics, you have to be able to listen and to hear and to go out of your way to let go of what you want to say, to hear what others really need, and then bring your expertise to that.
I would love to know from a guy that's traveling the country and he's in the trenches like yourself, what would you say is the number one? What are you hearing the most? What's the most common denominator? Kids are saying time and time again, all these schools you're going to, Stephen, they go, I need help with blank. What's the number one thing that you're hearing? I'll be just eager to hear.
Yeah, four things that high performing athletes, teenagers, high performing teenagers are saying again and again and again. What's the biggest issue facing you and your friends? Rural, big city, rich, poor, across ethnicities. Number one issue is mental health. It's the anxiety and the worry and the I'm stuck on a hamster wheel and no matter what I do, it's never enough. Is the number one issue that student athletes that I work with are dealing with. They'll say it's like they're on a hamster wheel. Nothing they ever do is ever good enough. They're always striving but never achieving. Another way that they talk about it is there's so much pressure on athletics, on school, on social life, on family life, on where you're going to go to college, what you're going to do. There's so much pressure that they lack the tools and they lack the tools to properly deal with it. And so they start looking for shortcuts, hacks, cheats to turn the pressure down just enough that they don't get crushed today and they can make it to tomorrow. And they go, I know it's not a long-term solution, but it's the best solution I have. So they're going to vape just to take a little bit of the edge off so they can make it to tomorrow. They're going to cut corners here and there. They're going to isolate themselves or do things that are not helpful to their body in secret because the pressure of being perfect is so great. And so you put all of that together and you have student athletes that are dealing with anxiety and depression and worry about the future and in a very big way. So that's the first thing is mental health. The second thing that student athletes tell me all the time is that everybody tells me I'm a leader, but nobody's taught me how to lead. And so it puts me in a lose-lose situation where if I step up and do what coach wants me to do, for example, if I step up and hold my teammate, who, by the way, is also my friend and is an integral part to the social network of my campus, if I hold my teammate accountable, because I've not been taught how to do it, I'm going to screw it up. And I'm not just going to screw up holding them accountable. I'm going to screw up my friendship. And now I'm going to be ostracized. I'm going to be siloed off as the goody two shoes, the suck up, the whatever, because I'm trying to hold them accountable and I don't know how to do it. So I'm going to screw it up. So I'm going to lose the friend and I'm not going to do what coach needed me to do because I don't know how to do it. But if I don't try to do it, then coach is mad at me. So what do? My friend gets mad at me or my coach gets mad at me. It's a lose-lose. And holding teammates accountable is just one way. There's 1,000 different ways in leadership. But what they say again and again is it's really overwhelming to be called a leader, but not be taught how to do it. And so one of the things that they tell me all the time is we need to be taught how to lead. A third thing that student athletes tell me, and these are connected to the first two, I asked them, what do you think adults get wrong about you? What are your coaches not get about your generation? And they said, we don't need more pressure. We put enough pressure on ourselves. What we need is more help. And what this communicates is that sometimes we think if we talk about something enough, again and again and again and again, and we really, really hammer in on it's important, and we really, really hammer in on the why, as important as the why is, that students will intuitively know the how. But nothing could be further from the truth. And I'll give you an example to make my point. My son was playing Little League Baseball. It's his first year this year. And, you just got dad coaches and they're doing the best they can to really, and they're reliving their glory days a little bit, And the coach tells our best player, and this kid was a baller. And they tell him, hey, Alex, when you get into the box, be aggressive. Now, we've been telling them be aggressive all year long. And this is one of those 4 or 5, keep your eye on the ball, be aggressive, baseball ready, those type things. Tell him be aggressive. He goes, okay, coach, walks to the batter's box, stops, turns around and says, hey, coach, what does aggressive mean? And we do the same thing as coaches. We do it as parents. We do it as leaders. We go, if I talk about stuff enough, if I put enough pressure on them, if they know the stakes, if they know just how important it is, then they'll be able to figure out how to do it. And what student athletes are telling me is, listen, the pressure of the consequence of how important it is, all of that, we get it. I know it's important. What I don't know is how to do it. And so what we started teaching is what we call the expectation triangle, right? It's a name and progress. But I think about the fire triangle. If you want to make a fire, you have to have 3 things, right? You have to have heat, you have to have fuel, and you have to have oxygen. And those 3 things have to be in proportion to one another. And if you have too much fuel, not enough heat and oxygen, then you don't get a fire. Or too much oxygen, then it blows the fire out, right? Those 3 things have to be in proportion. In the same way, for high-performing athletes, student athletes, teenagers, the 3 things that have to be in proportion are expectation. So that's the pressure. That's this really matters. This is how we do it, the standard. You've got to have a high standard. But in proportion to that, you also have to have encouragement and equipping. That all 3 are required: expectation, encouragement, and equipping. And if you have high equipping and high encouragement, but no expectation, then you've got somebody that's really, really talented and really, really unmotivated. What's the point of working hard? I can do little and get what I want. But if I have high expectation, high equipping, but no encouragement, then you're creating little robots, and then they're missing the joy of the game. Mm-hmm. But when you have all 3, then what happens is not only are they able to actually do what you want them to do because you've equipped them, they're raising the standard, you're encouraging them along the way. Because most students will give up, most people give up, not because they can't do something, but because they get discouraged.
Let me jump in real quick on that triangle. What are you seeing most when you're traveling the country? That expectation, I love that, by the way. Expectation, equipping, and encouragement. What are you seeing the most is what's the common one that's a little bit off?
Really high expectations.
Yes, that's what I was going to think.
Really high standard, very low equipping.
Yes, that's what I thought.
And the encouragement may or may not be there. But typically what I'm saying, and you can understand it if you think about speakers. Okay. You can have speakers who are leadership experts. Some tell you stories about great leaders, and they tell you stories about people with great character or who overcome great adversity. And they're big on story, but they're very small on, now here's how you do it. And lots of times you'll see speakers who are very, very successful because they tell a very happy-go-lucky, motivating story. And people go, wow, that was awesome. And they get back and they go, but how do I do it? And then you have other speakers who may have stories, may make you feel good or whatever, but they teach. and they teach you how to do it. And for my taste, I want to find that speaker that can entertain and motivate, can pull on my heartstrings, kick me in the butt too, but along the way is teaching me how to do the thing that the speaker is sharing. And so in the same way, when we have that high expectation, which is often there, it's the equipping that is most lacking. They just don't teach things that we assume everybody knows. For example, integrity. We know what integrity is. It's doing the right thing when nobody's watching. It's choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. However, we talk about it, and it's just like you just do it. What we try to do is take those just do it things like integrity or work ethic or grit or personal code or servant leadership. And what we try to do is treat those things like a muscle. And I would never tell you, hey, just go make your legs stronger. No, we would have a very specific plan. And as science advances, those plans get more and more and more specific. Well, we got to do the same thing with integrity or with grit or with personal code or servant leadership, that these are muscles. Or to put it another way, they're a talent. It's a character talent that has to be developed just like any other. And when we do that, then we start to lay the foundation that they have the intangibles needed to go and figure out very tangible skills, the skills that we're teaching them how to do. Let's not just start teaching with technique. Let's step back and let's start teaching with a foundation that that technique will be built on.
Love it. I cut you off there. I'm sorry about that. You had 3 out of 4. Do you remember what the fourth one was that most kids struggle with?
Sure. So the fourth thing, as you know, talk with students, we got mental health, we have the leadership piece, we have the pressure piece. The next thing that I hear from students again and again is the importance of learning how to communicate. They go, we don't know how to call our friends out. We don't know. And when we hear and you tell us to call our friends out, I alluded to this earlier, talking about leadership, but you've not taught us how. And so it's that how to have a difficult conversation, how to call somebody out in the moment in a workout, and to sit down and have a hard conversation, how to hear hard truths, how to be coachable. All of those things are skills that need to be taught, and you can't just and think that a kid's going to get it. Instead, you've got to teach them how to respond when they're being corrected, what to say, how to stand, when it's appropriate to ask a question. In the moment, if you're getting chewed out, that's not the moment to push back with a question. But these are the things that have to be taught to teach and to talk about as a team. It's one of the things we talk about a lot in helping teams communicate better is to have pocket phrases for different scenarios that everybody knows that when somebody says, hey, that's not us, that's code for I'm not working up to the standard. And I'm not going to take it personal. He's not, becoming a bad friend. He hasn't turned his back on me, sold me out, or any of that. This is an agreed upon phrase that we've all signed up for. When it's said, then we're going to check ourselves and go, okay, I'm not living up to the standard. And so we lay out different pocket phrases. You can take and say, whatever your mascot is, the school my kids go to, they're the Panthers. And so, when somebody's doing something, you go, hey, that's not what Panthers do. That's a phrase to go, hey, let's pause and check this out. So by teaching them how to communicate, giving them pocket phrases, walking through as a team, how to conflict resolute, how to go through difficult conversations like we do in the book, The Locker Room. That was an example of what it would look like if a team who needed to have a difficult conversation put into practice the things that we teach at Towards Character Development about how to have hard conversations, what it might look like. And so we put that in the book so that teams could see it. But all of that said, students tell me again and again, communication is a big thing. Knowing how to receive, how to give difficult, hard truths, and to have hard conversations.
Okay, this is phenomenal. There's so much in here, and I know we only got a half hour here to go through this, but I would love to hear now that we know what kids are struggling with, Stephen. Could we get to some action items? I know this isn't just a you're not going to get it all figured out in 30 minutes here, but I would really love because I'm hearing the same things working with high school athletes too. And a lot of it also I would add is lack of confidence. And I think that kind of probably goes in mental health in some way or another. But I would love to just dive in deeper on these four and give some applicable action items if you're open to it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Where do you want to start?
Let's start at the top.
Let's go. Mental health. Go ahead.
Okay, so when we think about mental health and helping students, the first thing that has to be said is that as a coach, you're not a mental health professional. I'm not a mental health professional. And so we don't need to try to be one. Even if we stayed at a Holiday Inn last night, we don't need to be a mental health professional. What we need to be is who we are. We need to be a coach. We need to be somebody that knows our athletes, that cares about our athletes, believes in our athletes, and are willing to take that love, that care, and that belief and turn it into an action to help move that student athlete forward. So, what does that mean for us? That means at times we may need to punt to the professionals, and we're going to take and walk with our kids to the counselor, get them connected with a mental health professional. One of the best things you can do for your team is have a dedicated mental health professional that works with your team regularly so that they're not this random stranger, but instead there's someone that they're familiar with. They're talking regularly, using the language. This is what anxiety is. We don't need it to be this hush hush cuss word. We want mental health issues to be on the same playing field as a sprained ankle or a pulled hamstring, that we would think about it in the same way. And we have an athletic trainer that talks about these things so students go, I don't have to freak out about this. We do things to prepare the body so that they don't get to the athletic training. The same thing on the mental health side. This can be a school counselor, this can be a local psychologist or mental health professional, but you want somebody in your corner. That's the baseline. Beyond that, things that we can think about. Do I have a check-in system? Some way that I can get to know my athletes, let them self-assess, and I can use that data combined with my intuition and what I'm seeing to get an insight into what's going on with my student athletes. That may be saying, hey, I'm gonna have some KPIs, some key performance indicators for my team. And every day when they show up to workout, I want to know. A school down in Harlingen, Texas does this, and they do it really, really well. They want to know, hey, how many hours of sleep did you get? Did you get dinner? Did you get breakfast? How are you feeling emotionally? How are you feeling physically? Right. And it's a yes, no, yes scale of 1 to 5. How you measure is really kind of irrelevant because the point is you're gonna learn your students over time. And if they come in and you find that a student's putting a 3 a lot, then okay, then you can ask the question, okay, are they just going down the middle? Do they tend to trend lower? Or do they view themselves in a negative light? So they're actually a 4.5, but they're just writing it as a 3. You're going to be able to take the numbers plus your experience with them, put that together, and you're going to start to get a picture of what's going on inside of your kids. A second thing you can think about is, what am I doing to coach the person, not just the player? And this distinction, I think, helps on the mental health side when you think about how often students will get funneled in and onto the tightrope of athletics, that they'll start walking and they're loving athletics and people are encouraging them and their families behind it. They're kind of good at it. So they start walking, but they don't realize that they're walking out onto this tightrope, and they get about halfway out there and they, maybe their junior year, the pressure of recruiting's kicking up, or maybe they've not done as well as they thought they would. They really, really feel like they've got to do well so that dad loves them. Dad gets upset when he doesn't play well, or whatever the case may be. And the pressure's really cranking up. And they look around, they go, wait a minute, I'm on a tightrope. There's no safety net. And if I look to the right at maybe a passion like theater or my grades, if I look to the left, like going and hanging out with friends, I'm going to fall and I'm going to be absolutely screwed. Um, when we only focus on the player, what we unintentionally do is we force them out onto this tightrope where they get stuck, where they have to either keep on going no matter what it costs them, or they got to burn out, crash out, and fall because there's no going back. So when we begin to invest in the person over and above the player, we're getting to know our kids by name. We're getting to know what their passions are. We're getting to know what they're into. You may have a lineman, 6'13", 290, and he's into Harry Potter. Well, man, let him bring his wizard wand and do his Harry Potter stuff. Welcome all of him, all of your female athletes into the locker room. Know their home life. Spend time with them. Look for ways to build community within the locker room outside of what you do on the field or the court. What that's going to allow is that's going to build trust with the athlete to go, okay, it's safe for me to be all of me. And that means when I get to the place where the part of me that's here is anxious, worried, whatever, I know that my coach can handle it. I know that my coach will welcome it, as opposed to only caring about me if I'm scoring touchdowns. So as we think about mental health, get you a professional, look for some type of KPI, some type of system that student athletes can check in on, and then look for ways to coach the whole person, not just the player, so that we don't funnel athletes into this tightrope that they have to be perfect to keep from falling, but instead they can be their whole self, mistakes and all, and be able to continue to move forward.
Steven, you're on a roll, and I'm not getting in your way. Let's go to the next one, man. So this one is huge, and this is kind of my home base, my dad's home base, leadership, yours as well. So how to lead and specifically how to hold others accountable. I love what you said earlier about if I hold my buddy accountable, it's not just a teammate, it's also my friend, and there's also some social status, right? Maybe this guy's really popular. There's a lot of those things that maybe us as adults we kind of forget about because it's been a while since we were in the high school arena. So talk to me about that. How do you teach kids how to lead? What are the action items that you found to be most successful? I'm super curious.
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier and this is kind of 2 and 4 put together,
Yep.
but we mentioned the leadership framework: model, teach, test, and reward. And so we oftentimes will stop at modeling. Hey, I value servant leadership or positive leadership or whatever the case may be. And so I do it really, really well as the coach. And so I expect you to see me do it and then follow along. That's like trying to ask somebody that can't swim, hey, watch Michael Phelps and then go race, an 800-meter breaststroke or whatever. It's not going to work out well. But modeling is important so that they can see it in action. But what we have to do is we've got to get explicit with our language. That's where teaching comes in, where we start to articulate what we as coaches are doing without even thinking. And so it may be as simple as, I think about with my son, when I go to hold the door open for somebody, I don't just do it, let him walk through and go, hey, he saw me and he'll figure it out. I go, when I go to open the door because there's somebody walking behind us, I say, son, come hold this door so that this couple behind us can walk through first. Right? I articulate what I'm doing to him, what I'm doing for him. And then as we walk in, I just follow up and say, it's the gentlemanly thing to do to hold the door open for others as we walk in. So that's putting language to this thing that I do without even thinking. That's teaching. And we do that again and again and again. When we're walking through, we may say things like, hey, as we're encouraging in the weight room, great work. That's a great set. Okay. Well, let's just add the phrase of a leader. That's the effort of a leader right there. hey, this is the way a leader squats, right? And so what that's doing is that's just giving them those pocket phrases, those pocket actions to go, coach tells me I'm a leader. Coach said this is what leaders do. If I want to be a leader, I go do that. And then when there are things that we want to get deeper on, for example, integrity, well, then let's break down for us what builds the integrity muscle. Okay. So, what, again, this is just that teaching piece. Well, what builds integrity? I want you to have integrity. How do I teach you to lead with integrity? Well, you're going to tell the truth. I want you to be a truth teller. I want you to make your commitments count. I want you to take 100% responsibility. Okay. And just those three things to go, okay, because we value integrity, I value telling the truth, making your commitments count, and taking responsibility. And so then we can ask the question, okay, how do I take responsibility when I make a mistake so that I can have integrity, so that I can lead? Okay, well, we just start walking it back. Well, when you make a mistake, whoever makes a mistake owns the mistake. You own the mistake, you can change it. Okay, well, how can I do that? Well, you got to ask why till you know why. Okay? When you ask why enough times, then you get to something you can change. And when you can control and change it, then we start working back forward. And so the specifics of the teaching is going to be determined by what it is you want them to learn. But the principle across the board is the same, that we have to articulate and practice what we want them to do. And we've got to break it down into the most doable step, the most doable next step, so that they can get great at that. Just like we build a bench press, just like we build a power clean, we're doing the same thing with leadership. When it comes to holding teammates accountable, things that we talk about, the pocket phrases, okay? We talk about how to get to that hard conversation and preparing. We talk about the 5 Ps. Prior preparation permits proper performance. It's true across life. It's true in these conversations. What do? Well, I've got to prepare myself. Okay. And so these are the things that we're telling athletes. If you're going to call your teammate out, and you're going to have that hard conversation with them, here's what you need to do. Prepare yourself first. Check and make sure that your intentions are right. Why you're going to this teammate, that you're not doing it to put them down or lift you up. You are doing this to lift them up. So check your intention. That's a preparation step. All right. Prepare the other person. Don't ambush them on the way to 5th period. All right. Invite them. Hey, can we go get tacos tomorrow night? Because tacos always make hard conversations easier. All right. So, hey, can we go get tacos tomorrow night? I want to talk to you about some things on a team. Give them a chance, and even tell them, hey, I want to talk about fill in the blank. And that's preparing the other person so that you're not ambushing them, right? And then the next thing that you want to do is you kind of get that preparation stage. I prepare myself, the other person, and the place. Then when I get to the conversation, I want to ask more than I accuse. I want to ask questions. Hey, can you clarify something for me? I saw this. This was my experience. And when I saw this, this is what I interpreted it. I saw this is what I thought. Is that true? That's a confirm. Or did I get it wrong? Can you clarify? By asking questions, you allow the other person to confirm or clarify. Whereas with accusations, you put the other person, and the only thing they can do is defend, right? And so asking questions instead of lobbing accusations, but also just coming at it in many ways with the humanity that you would want them to come to you about it with, especially if they didn't understand everything. They didn't know what it was like to be that person, what they were going on at home. So coming in curious without the need to be right makes all the difference in that conversation. So that's a teaching, but here's the catch. We know well that just because you teach somebody something doesn't mean that they've got it. Mm-hmm. How do you know that they've got something? You've got to test it. And so If you really want your student athletes to be great leaders, give them leadership tests. Give them an opportunity to practice that leadership. That can look like mock hard conversations. That can look like simulated situations. It can also look like giving student athletes genuine ownership on the team. Don't have a captain's council and their job is to rat on their teammates. Don't have a captain's council whose job is to take a photo after you fed them lunch so that you can tweet it out and let the world know what a great leader, developer of leaders you are. If you're going to have a captain's council, give them meaningful jobs, the jobs that a coach could do without even thinking, but it's going to require them to really step up. Ordering team lunch after a game. So let them call the restaurant that's going to donate the lunch. Let them email. Let them walk through that process. How many do you need? What's your budget? Let them walk through it. And you go, well, how does that help with building leaders? What it does is it gives them an ownership stake. Because when they get that chicken sandwich on the bus after the game, I guarantee you they're going to look around and go, hey, I ordered that chicken sandwich. You're welcome, right? There's just this sense of pride that I did this. And the more opportunities we give students to go, I did this, the more ownership they're going to take. But when we do that and they fall short, guess what? That's them telling us what they need. Listen. And so when they fall short on something, they get something wrong, they don't do it to the standard, we get to retest and reteach. Excuse me. We get to reteach and then we'll retest. And in so doing, we don't just say stuff and assume they got it. We teach it, test them, and know that they get it. And then once we've done that, then we reward it. Because what gets rewarded gets repeated. And if you value in your actions and in your rewards, athletes who are fast and score touchdowns and hit baseballs and spike balls and all of this, and you never reward leadership, students aren't dumb. They will have no incentive to go into those potentially lose-lose situations and lead, and so they won't. And so I tend to believe that if there's not leadership from student athletes on the team, it's because there's not leadership from the coaches. And it's because they're not teaching it, they're not valuing it, they're not testing it, rewarding it. They may be modeling it, but they're not doing the rest of it to help it come through. So that's kind of like broad picture. But as we think about leadership and we think about accountability, those are things that we're talking about often. We want to give both the model and the explicit language that students can take action on. We test them that they can have ownership, and then we reward it when they step up.
Difficult conversations can be uncomfortable, and whether you are 48 or 18, they can be very uncomfortable. I would say over time, we probably get better at them and we probably get more comfortable in the uncomfortable. A lot of student athletes listen to this podcast. Stephen, I would love for you to touch on what about this student athlete that needs to have the difficult conversation, not with their teammates, Stephen, but with coach. I've run into this a few times with some of my athletes on the mental performance side of things where they're having trouble with coach and they're disagreeing on some of things or they're not really seeing eye to eye. And, maybe the coach doesn't do a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, this leadership, all this leadership stuff, but a conversation needs to be had. Otherwise, it's going to be a long year, or for some, it's going to be a long 4 years because I'm a freshman. What is the message right now if you're speaking to student athletes, if they need to have a difficult conversation with coach? What's the tools? What do you tell them?
It's the same thing. It's communicating your experience and asking questions. It's understanding that you're not the center of attention. You're not what the team is about, and yet you're an important part of the team. So you go through the preparation. Is my heart in the right spot? Am I doing this because my parents are pressuring me into this? Am I doing this because I'm pissed about not getting playing time? Am I doing this because my travel ball coach says this? Well, guess what, buddy? You're not in travel ball. You're in high school ball. You're in team ball. And That's a really hard piece. This is a side note, but think about this. With the exception of football, almost every other sport has a club team associated with it,
Hmm.
and it almost always goes nearly year round. So student athletes spend 9 months out of the year on a showcase team, on a team, air quotes, that's designed to highlight individuals. And then they get into school ball at their high school, and that's the only place where it's no longer about them, but about the team. And so the reason I say I've got to check myself is because I get 3 times as many reps playing on an air quote team that highlights me than I do being on a team where the we is before the me. So I, as a student athlete, I need to check that and go, where am I coming from? Just like we do in other hard conversations. And then we reach out to coach and we ask coach for a meeting. And we say, coach, I want to talk about blank. Okay. And this is setting them up. Another part of the preparation in this, when we're going to talk to coach, is I need to take a look at lots of times schools will have student athlete handbooks or policies about playing time, about different things. And I need to ask the question, am I just misinterpreting something? You know, or is this a genuine issue? So that's that check. So then when I go into it, it's very clear. And you got to practice this, right? Don't shoot from the hip on this. Coach, this is my experience. Can you confirm or clarify? Right? Your experience can't be denied. Your interpretation can be confirmed as right, or it can be clarified. And we walk through it. And at the end, the goal, because you're on a team, is we want to get to a place not where you're right or you win. We want to get to a place where you have 100% commitment to a 51% decision. That you might not get your way, but because you're a part of the team, are you willing to still give 100% of that? Nothing wrong with sticking up for yourself, but don't do it at the expense of the team. And of course, that's assuming there's nothing morally going wrong and all of
Hmm.
this.
Hmm. I think some of the hesitancy for athletes, in my experience, not having the conversation is a part of it. I don't know what to say, but then another part is, well, I don't want to lose out on playing time, or I don't want coach to think different of me. Nobody else is saying anything, but all the other girls are thinking it. I want to say something, but it's also my senior year, and I don't want to be benched or etc. Some of that comes back. A lot of that comes back to the coach not creating an environment or a culture where we can have truthful Tuesdays, where we can kind of open the bottle a little bit and have these conversations. So touch on that a little bit. Maybe now we go to more of the coach. How can coaches create a culture and an environment, Stephen, from your experience, that can have these more difficult conversations and make them more normal? What does that look like to you? Because the teams that can have those conversations, man, they're light years ahead of the maybe some of the athletes I've dealt with that are just scared to talk to coach. To me, that's absurd. I'm like, gosh, that's the last person you should be scared to talk to, right?
Mhm. One of the things that students will say often is, it feels like I have to lie to coach and
Mm,
tell them I'm okay when I'm not, um, because they expect me to be okay, because there's not been any space created for them to be anything other than okay. If as a coach, you're only checking in with athletes as you're walking from the locker room to the field and that 3-minute walk, and you say, hey, how was your day? Well, what do you expect them to say? I only have space to say my day is good. I only have to say space to say everything is going okay. Uh, and so if we want students to tell us the truth, then we have to create space for them to tell us the truth. That can look like using language regularly that feels taboo or uncomfortable. Words like, accountability, anxiety, depression, using those words, going, hey, we're going to call somebody out, hey, or we're using these language that students don't feel comfortable using. We use it often, so it takes away the sting of it. We also create space. You said Truthful Tuesdays. Part of the way that our curriculum at Two Words Character Development is implemented is it's got an opportunity for after the video, it's got a couple worksheets where you can work through and discuss. Making time, even if it's 12 or 15 minutes a week, to walk through some discussion questions and to visit in groups, create space for students to share what's going on in their world. And so, as a coach, if I want students to tell me the truth, I've got to create space for them to do it. And I have to be willing to listen when they do. Because if a student takes a risk
Mm,
and is vulnerable and tells us
mm,
the truth,
mhm.
and then we ignore them, they're never going to do it again. Why bother talking to coach? I tried that and she didn't do anything about it. So what's the point? And so when, that doesn't mean that we have to bend over to whatever students ask of us, but it does mean that we have to genuinely hear them and engage with them. And if we decide to go in a different way, have a conversation about that decision, and then follow up with them 6 days, 2 weeks later, and go, hey, it's been a couple days since we had the conversation. I know that you wanted it to go this way. I still feel like it's best for the team that we did this. How are you feeling about it? And that communicates to that athlete that you heard them, and most importantly, you cared about them, and that their concerns were valid, even if they didn't get their way. So those are a few things that as coaches we can do to begin to create space for student athletes to tell us the truth. Those KPIs also another way to help create space for the truth.
To me, Steven, maybe you agree here, but I just don't think there's enough out there yet on having difficult conversations. We know with that there's all these events on how to have this certain offense and how to run this defense and how to do this drill, but there's just not enough out there yet. And hopefully, with all the stuff you're doing and I'm doing, there can be more conversations about how to have difficult conversations. You can prevent so much, man. Agreements prevent disagreements.
Mhm. 100%. And lots of times, there are things we can do to keep to cut the problem off before we
Right.
get to the hard conversations.
Right.
You know, like things like not waiting to speak up. The longer we wait to say something to a teammate, the longer we wait to say something to a coach, the worse and the bigger it gets. When we just call them out and then we'll go, hey, that's not who we are. Hey, we got another rep right there. Coach, we need to do that again. Johnny didn't get it right. And then off we go. And Johnny comes back, hey, man, why'd you do that? Because you didn't live up to the standard. That's why. It's like, boom, in the moment, done. But if I let Johnny slide 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, four, then when I finally blow up at Johnny, man, I'm not just going to use the predetermined catchphrase. Man, I'm going to lose my stuff on Johnny. And then it's going to get personal. And then it became so much bigger, all because we waited, all because we didn't have clear agreements, all because we weren't willing to have integrity, keep our commitments, so on. So there's a lot. It's an important piece, but it really is connected to all of this we put in the category of going beyond the game. And when coaches coach beyond the game, then athletics becomes the brilliant thing, the brilliant classroom that athletics can become. It's when we only teach a sport that athletics becomes all of the nonsense that athletic haters like to highlight. Um, but when we go beyond the game, athletics becomes a classroom for the game of life, where we learn to build character talent, this foundation that all other skills can be built upon. We learn skills that can be transferred from athletics to the classroom, classroom to the hallway, hallway to the house. We learn how to become young men and young women of character. We learn how to lead, how to set goals, how to work towards those goals, how to problem solve towards those goals, how to have hard conversations, how to be truthful and honest about what's going on inside emotionally and mentally and physically. We learn so much. We build relationships and friendships. We go through trials together. We build trust and we tell the truth, and we do so much when we coach beyond the game. When we stop at coaching the game, all we do is we teach a bunch of kids to get really good at a kid's game. And we pat ourselves on the back because we beat another guy or another gal at a kids game. And for what? A trophy? A title? What good is that? But when we can invest in kids, build young men and young women of character, and 5 and 10 and 15 years later, they come back and they say, the things that I learned from you in the classroom of sport set me up for success in the game of life. That's when you know you're successful. Hardest part about coaching is you won't know that you're successful until 5, 10, and 15 years after your kids have left your care. That's the hardest part about coaching.
I like to end my shows with a piece of advice. And I think we've done a really good job talking about the student athletes. We've talked about the coaches. I would love to leave with what's the advice, Stephen, for parents out there? You're a dad of an athlete. I think this could be the most pivotal piece of advice because you're around them more than the coaches. If you were to have a message, a keynote, a billboard, just something out there for the parents, turn up the radio a little bit when Stephen talks here. What's the message to the parents out there?
The only thing that your students need to hear from you after a game, I love you, I'm proud of you, and I love to watch you play. Nothing else matters. It doesn't matter how good of a coach you think you are. It doesn't matter how much you think you understand the game. It doesn't matter if you could improve your student athlete's performance. None of that matters. What matters is that you love them, regardless of your performance. Case Keenum, he was a quarterback in the NFL, but many different teams. And he's a Texas guy, and his dad, after every game, whether he played his best game or his worst, he met him after the game, gave him the same hug, had the same smile, and said the same thing, regardless of his performance. Because as a parent, we cannot lose sight that our relationship with our kid, what we are doing, investing in them, is entirely disconnected from their performance, but not for them. For the student, they think if I do well, mom and dad are going to be more proud of me. If I do bad, they're going to be less proud of me. Why it is ingrained in them, I do not know. But that's the standard default operating for student athletes. So as parents, we have to override that belief. I love you. I'm proud of you. I love to watch you play. What are you proud of? Tell them, be explicit, and start with things that have nothing to do with physical talent. You can include those, but talk about how they played the game. Talk about your family values and how they displayed those. Talk about the preparation they did this week, what they overcame to be there. Tell the story of your pride for them. Say, I love to watch you play, not win, not be the best. I love to watch you play. Why? Because I love seeing you happy. I love seeing you do what you love to do. And it's a joy to get to be a part of your life. When I talk to parents and I do parent keynotes, one of the things we talk about is the 4 roles of a parent, especially the parent of a student athlete. And that's the cop, the caregiver, the coach, and the consultant. And there are times where a student needs a cop. That means they're doing something they ought not do, that's harmful, it's against the law, and we need somebody to step in and say, stop. Sometimes they need a caregiver, someone who's going to be there physically or emotionally to take care of them, right? Whether because they're down or they're sick, or we just put a roof over their head and clothes on their back. They need a caregiver. Other times they need a coach, not a coach in the athletic sense, a coach in the let me coach you up on how to do life, how to work through this situation. Let me give you that parental advice. I've walked through this before. Let me walk through it with you. And then other times they just need a consultant, someone that's going to say, if I were you, I would think about this. And whatever you decide is up to you. But here's some things to think about how to make your decision. And I think a lot of times the trouble or the disconnect between parents and student athletes comes when the parent doesn't play the right role at the right time. And I think at the end of a game, the role to play is the caregiver. Is to come in there. I love you. I'm proud of you. I love to watch you play. And if they want to talk more, let them talk more. They'll tell you. And if they don't, then don't talk about that. Right? Don't connect some sense of I'm a good parent to your kid's performance. Nothing will mess them up quicker than that. So that's my advice to parents. I love you. I'm proud of you, and I love to watch you play.
Stephen Mackey, ladies and gentlemen, how can my listeners support you?
Best way to stay connected on Twitter at Mackey Speaks, Mackey. You can also go to MackeySpeaks.com, and that kind of serves as a central hub for everything I do for my speaking to teams, parents, businesses. Those are all kind of hubs out of MackeySpeaks.com. From there, you can also find a link to buy my book, The Locker Room: How Great Teams Heal Hurt, Overcome Adversity, and Build Unity. It's a Wall Street Journal bestseller, debuted on the bestsellers list back in May of 2022. So it's just over a year ago. And it's on Amazon available, or you can reach out through the website for signed copies or bulk orders if you would like. And then you can also, from MackeySpeaks.com, find out about 2 Words Character Development, which is our character and leadership curriculum that I write, film, and produce with my team for athletic departments across the country. We're the official character development curriculum of the Texas High School Coaches Association and the Canyon Athletic Association in Arizona, with more partnerships and associations growing. We serve well over 1,000 campuses across the United States of America, 14 different states. It's a weekly video-based character development curriculum that gives lessons for coaches, captains, athletes, and the family. And we every week do exactly what we talked about today, is we teach and motivate. We encourage, we equip, and we invite students to step into becoming young men and young women of character and learning how to do it through the classroom of athletics.
You're doing phenomenal things. You're making a big impact. Thank you for taking the time, man. I appreciate what you're doing off this podcast, and also appreciate your time today.
Absolutely, man. You're first class. I appreciate you.